And if you like these Salamander videos or any other battle reports or the content on the channel, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. Alright, welcome back my fellow Salamanders. And this video is going to be a little more in-depth about this list. Just things I've learned within the past week and so, just of looking things up and playing a few games with the Salamanders. As someone commented in the last video, you don't get +1 strength in combat. It's not if you're within 12, it's just with ranged weapons. So there's a few changes here. I'm always willing to admit mistakes, and thanks for pointing that out. So with the changes, the list I have, from left to right, I have 5 Infiltrators, 6 Eradicators, 6 Aggressors, with a Grabis Captain, 2 Scout Squads, Blade Guard, Detachment is going to be a Lieutenant, and Adrax, 2 Redemptor dreadnaughts, 6 more Aggressors, and then Vulcanistan with 10 Infernus Marines. And once again, I'm going with no transports. I just don't like the capacity rules for some of them. You just can't fit the right amount. With a regular Land Raider, you can't fit your 6 Aggressors with your Grabis Captain. Also, you can't fit your 6 Blade Guard with Adrax, so it's weird, so I don't really like bringing them to make a big target. I might play around the idea of changing my 6-man Aggressor squad to something else, because the Aggressors did go up by a fair amount of points in the data slate, so that's the one group I think I could probably take out and play around with. Maybe the other Redemptor, but I like the -1 damage the Redemptors bring, and they get a lot more of the assault than any of the other kind of Redemptor chassis do. And with this list, I'm only going to have access to 3 of the 6 stratagems, so yes, it's a little hindering that you don't get access to all your stratagems, but the other ones really revolve around transport. So if you do bring transports and they die, you're not going to use them anyways. And then even though if you bring some transports, only a few units are going to be able to interact with these stratagems. And the other ones that I'm going to have access to are just so powerful, you're going to be using them quite a bit anyway. So the utility of these transport stratagems goes down quite a bit if you don't really have the CP. And there's nothing in my list that's generating more extra CP. But the 3 stratagems that I do have are quite powerful. I have Armor of Content, like most other Space Marines, 1 CP. And then for 1 CP, I have +1 to wound if I'm within 6, so that's with ranged or melee, so that's pretty handy. It's only 1 CP, especially if it's melee, you're going to be within 6 anyways. You can use that on your Aggressors, which can really bring up their damage, and same as your Blade Guard, especially with Adrax and Lieutenant, the lethal hits and the reroll wounds. You can really multiply that unit into some really big damage. And the third one is more torrent weapon oriented. That's why I have the Infernus Marines and the Aggressors, especially the Grabis Captain. This stratagem, as well as the +1 to wound stratagem, is a battle tactic, and this next stratagem is a devastating wounds one, so it gives your torrent weapons devastating wounds. And that works really well with your Aggressors, because your Aggressors already have Twin Linked built in. Maybe if you do have a CP in hand, you use your Grabis Captain to say, hey, I want to make my Aggressors use devastating wounds, and then I'm going to use my CP to make them +1 to wound. And there probably is other setups and variations and ways to build Salamanders list, but this is the units that I have. I have access to a few more other ones that I'm kind of getting built, but these are the main Space Marine Salamanders I have. I want it to feel and look thematically like Salamanders. And just for a little bit of the game plan for this list, you can't advance and charge. Everything does have assault, so you can advance and shoot everything, but nothing really has advance and charge. With Firestorm Assault, you don't have access to the doctrines to give yourself advance and charge for a turn. Only just everyone has assault every turn, and then the +1 to strength if your ranged weapons are within 12 inches. There's a lot of close range, mid-range shooting in this army, so you really got to be careful with your screens and just your measuring, just making sure you don't get out of position. So you do have some speed, but you got to be careful you're not going too fast that you get out of position, get flanked, or you get kind of caught in some crossfire and some charges. They are tanky. There's a lot of toughness 6 in here. There's a little bit of vulnerable saves with the Blade Guard, but there's not a lot of invulnerable saves throughout the army. It's just the Blade Guard. Scouts are used to just try to maybe gain some first turn secondaries, or try to block your opponent in the deployment zone as much as you can. And that one group of Infiltrators, they're just for standing on your home objective. So this first of the 2 6-man Aggressor squads with the Grabis Captain, and they have the D6 +1, Strength 5 flaming weapons. They ignore cover, they have torrent, and they have the ability that if they're shooting their closest eligible target, they have AP +1. So you get within 12 with these guys, so it becomes a Strength 5 flamer. It's really good for shooting anything toughness 4, because you now go up to wounding on 3s. And like I said, you can give them the +1 to wound stratagem if you're within 6 inches. But the big key is with the Grabis Captain with one of these fellas, giving them access to the free devastating wound stratagem. They're tough, but they don't have invulnerable saves. They're toughness 6, they're move 5, so the assault once again really helps them move up the table fast. They're good in melee, but they're more good flaming something up and then charging it, mobbing it up. So keep these guys protected. These guys can do some good damage for you. Next we have our 2 Redemptors. I am using a Ballistus as a proxy, just while I'm getting the other Redemptor painted up. But what I've changed in my old list is I kind of had one Redemptor for standing kind of back close to my home field objective. Well, now I have the Infiltrators for doing that. So it allows me to use these 2 Redemptors to push up the table, but the Redemptors really benefit from an assault, so now I can advance them up, getting them some good shooting lanes and shoot. And they have a good melee threat, so we know I can advance and charge, but if something charges them with the -1 damage they have, they can tank a lot of hits now. I can get them up the table real quick. I think 2 Redemptors can cause a lot of nuisance. It'll mess with my opponent's target priority if I have aggressors, Redemptors, Eradicators on the table. They both have the Macroplasma, Icarus Pods, Heavy Flamers, because Salamanders, and the Twin Stormbolters. And then we have our 2 units of Scouts. And these Scouts are just for messing with the enemy's movement. At first it's awesome, but if you go second, you want to have a way to stop the enemy from getting all the way up the table and kind of pinning you in your own deployment, because you have speed, so you want to take advantage of your speed. So you're going to try to use these Scouts to mess with your enemy's deployment, mess with their first turn movement, so you can have the opportunity to get your aggressors and your Redemptors up the table and really threaten the midfield, because this is a midfield army. You don't have a lot of long-range shooting, so you want to be able to get in the midfield as fast as you can without having to deal with a bunch of chaff and junk in your way. And these fellows have Infiltrate and Scout. Drop them down somewhere, then maybe if you don't turn 1, you get to move these guys, maybe go on that wall, or push them forward even more and move block the enemy even more. This is another change from my original video. I was thinking of running a Apothecary Biologist with them to give them the lethal hits, as well as a enhancement to kind of ensure at least one of these lethal hits. But in the games that I've played, it just doesn't come up enough. They're usually, if you can, are shooting vehicles, which they get reroll hits, damage, wounds, everything kind of innately built into their data card. It's just not worth putting the points into a character just to try to bring up their damage a little bit when you're shooting something you really don't want to be shooting with them anyways. So this is how I would recommend running Eradicators, just no character. Especially in Firestorm, none of the enhancements really add anything that's going to take these guys to the next level. Just run them how they are. They're still really good for killing vehicles. Especially with Firestorm Assault, they're really good. You take them out of reserves. If you're within 12 inches of a vehicle, you're going to get that +1 to your strength. So it's going to bring your meltas up to strength 10. And that can really make the difference when you're shooting some of these vehicles that are toughness 10. Because instead of strength 9, toughness 10, wounding on 5s, you're going to be wounding on 4s now. And that's huge. Especially with the rerolls. Especially with the rerolls you get from the data card innately shooting a vehicle. So now instead of trying to reroll for 5s, you're rerolling for 4s. And then I have the Infiltrators. So these guys I'm just playing as Infiltrators. They're just for standing on my home field objective. They are great for that 12-inch deny reserves. So I think resources are better spent on these guys standing on my home field objective instead of a Redemptor. I can have a Redemptor close by in case they need support, but it's much better than having that big chunky Redemptor stuck to my home field objective all game. So I would also recommend you guys just having at least one of these guys. These guys can really stop a lot of those deep strike shenanigans and movement tricks that are quite prevalent with a lot of the top armies these days. Same as my last list, I have Vulcan Histan with the 10 Infernus Marines. He doesn't directly buff the Infernus Marines. Vulcan's ability allows you to select a visible unit in your shooting phase within 24 inches, and you can reroll any torrent or melt weapons for your entire army against that unit, so that he doesn't directly buff them, but these guys are always going to be shooting at something that's within 24 inches. So he's great for multiplying their damage if he has to. Because his ability as well, you pick an objective in no man's land. If he can get onto that objective and control it, he goes up to OC 10, 5 leadership with a 4-up feel no pain. No, they don't get the 4-up feel no pain, but he gets that 10 OC, so it makes it really hard to come take it from him. You have to kill most of those Infernus Marines and then him to really take that objective back. Final unit is Adrax Agaton with his 6 Blade Guard. I also attached a lieutenant to them, and the lieutenant's going to have the Champion of Humanity enhancement, so it allows the entire unit to ignore modifiers. And I try to do as much as I can to give myself a big, beefy, tanky, high damage melee unit. So Adrax allows you to reroll your wounds, Lieutenant gives you lethal hits, and the Blade Guard can reroll their 1s if they decide to use that ability. They can either reroll their hits of 1 or reroll their invulnerable saves of 1. possibly attacking the over moment target, you can really put out some good damage. So you can be re-rolling your hits, lethal hits, re-rolling your wounds, possibly use the stratagem to give you +1 to wound, so you can really crank out some good damage with these Blade Guard. I've been calling them my Flame Guard, so I think this combination of putting the Lieutenant in here, dropping the Assault Intercessors for a little more utility with the Infiltrators, getting the second Redemptor, I think this is the better overall list with all the units I have. I'm going to test it against the Need for Speed list I made with the Custodes, and have a little bit different format for the solo test games I might throw up on the channel here for you guys, just to see how they do and see if anyone kind of likes that format. After testing and playing, I might change these 6 aggressors to something else. I'm not sure yet. I want to test this list because I think this list can be pretty strong. And then my next Salamander video will be on some tips and tricks, maybe on your positioning, your deployment, just trying to maximize your points, being in position so you don't get your aggressors and your big units caught without being able to do their big damage first. The Salamanders aren't meant to be super competitive, that's more my Custodes, but just so you can have a little more fun using these fellas, because they may not be super competitive in the meta, but I still think they can be a lot of fun. They can win some games. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by.